Hello and welcome. My name is Kyle Chernenkov, and this is my criminal profile assessment. So throughout this presentation, we will learn who Aileen Wuornos is, and we will see how a lifetime full of neglect, childhood abuse, drugs, alcohol, and prostitution eventually led Aileen to killing several men, all before being criminally executed by lethal injection in Florida State on October 9th, 2002. So to start off, I would like to introduce to you Aileen Carol Wuornos. Aileen was born in Rochester, Michigan on February 29, 1956, to her 17-year-old mother Diane Wuornos and her absent father Leo Pittman. Aileen's father was somebody that she would never meet. He wasn't around due to his background in crime. Leo was in prison when Aileen was born, and her mother had already filed for a divorce. Pittman was a schizophrenic with a long history of violent behavior. He later hung himself in prison in 1969 while serving a sentence, this time for child molestation. Diane was the mother at only 15 years of age to Aileen's brother Keith, and then 2 years later, a mother of two when Aileen came around. Carrying the burden of raising two young children while only being a teenager herself became to be too much for Diane, and eventually she gave up. Aileen was abandoned at the age of 4 by her mother. She and her brother were adopted by their grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos. Hopes of a fresh start and a new beginning with the change of parenthood were soon destroyed, and it only brought more pain and suffering to both Aileen and Keith. Grandfather Lori repeatedly abused his granddaughter, and grandmother Britta was an extremely physically abusive woman, as well as a raging alcoholic. The grandparents allowed these children to grow up believing that they were their real parents, and subjected them to many cruel beatings. From a young age, Wuornos was beaten with a belt while bent over a table, sometimes forced to do so while being naked. The physical abuse was traumatic for Aileen, but it got worse. By the age of 11, her grandfather had begun sexually abusing her, and it was at this time that Aileen began acting out at school. She was engaging with sex in exchange for loose change and cigarettes. The money she earned from selling her body at a very, very young age was used to buy alcohol, drugs, and to win over new friends. In 1970, at the age of 14, Aileen became pregnant and was placed in a home for unwed mothers. Immediately after her son was born, he was put up for a closed adoption, meaning that Aileen would never learn his whereabouts. Aileen then returned home to live with his grandparents once again. But only a few months into being home, Aileen's grandmother Britta became very ill and passed away due to alcohol-induced liver failure. Lori, grandfather, now threw both of his grandchildren out of the house. Both Keith and Aileen were placed in foster care. Aileen ran away almost immediately, and she lived in a patch of woods near her old neighborhood, supporting herself via prostitution. Aileen did not stay here for long. She began hitchhiking around the Midwest, continuing to work as a prostitute around the truck stops along her way. She was arrested for a drunk driving incident in Colorado in May of 1974, but eventually had made it all the way to Florida by 1976. While hitchhiking in Florida, Aileen would be picked up a man named Louis Fell. Louis was a 16-year-old male that was very wealthy and happened to be the president of a yacht club. Their love seemed to flourish, and they eventually married in May of 1976. It now seemed that a life of abuse and neglect would be turned around. But shortly after their wedding, it was clear that the internal damage that Aileen had received was too deep for even this fairy tale to repair. Aileen could have lived the trophy wife lifestyle, but instead she insisted on drinking at bars and getting into fights. And she was jailed for attacking a bartender while on a trip home to Michigan. After many incidents such as this one, it became clear to Louis that the spark of love that these two once shared could never progress into a healthy relationship together. Louis then had the marriage annulled. During this process, Aileen's brother Keith had just passed away due to throat cancer. Aileen received a $10,000 life insurance policy that she blew through in only a matter of months. Now, Aileen was forced back into truck stop prostitution. She was now escaping her teen years, and Aileen's pretty looks were beginning to be overcome by her life of hard living and destructive habits. She now found it much harder to attract clients, and business was beginning to slow. This left her in desperate needs of money to support her lifestyle. She was then arrested for robbing a convenience store in May of 1981 and for passing forged checks in May of 1984. By 1986, she had just about hit rock bottom. She was arrested for car theft in January and then attempted armed robbery of a client in June. Again, just as it seemed Aileen was losing her grip, love seemed to walk into her life. At a lesbian bar in Daytona Beach, Aileen met Tyria Moore, a hotel maid, and again they seemed to hit it off and very quickly moved in together. During these times, Aileen seemed to be happy again. Her businesses picked up, and she was able to support both her and Moore. But inevitably, her past would catch up to her once again. Only this time, it worsened, and this is where her killing spree began. Aileen continued to work as a hitchhiking prostitute like before, but now, instead of receiving payment and moving on to the next client, Aileen would rob the men of everything valuable in their possessions, then kill them. Between December 1989 and September 1990, the bodies of several men were found murdered along the highways of Central Florida. Richard Mulroy, a 51-year-old male, was a Clearwater electronics shop owner. On December 1st, 1989, deputy in Volusia County discovered an abandoned vehicle belonging to Richard Mulroy. His body was found December 13th, several miles away in a wooded area. Mulroy had been shot several times. David Spears, a 43-year-old male, was a winter garden construction worker. His body, found June 1st, 1990, along Highway 19 in Citrus County. Except for a baseball cap, Spears was nude. He had died of 6 bullet wounds to the torso. Charles Carskaden, a 40-year-old male who was a part-time rodeo worker. His body was found June 6, 1990 in Pasco County. The medical examiner found 9 small caliber bullets in the lower chest and upper abdomen. Troy Burress, a 50-year-old male who was a sausage salesman from Ocala, was reported missing on July 1st, and on August 4th, 1990, law officers found the body in a wooded area along State Road 19 in Marion County. The body was substantially decomposed, but evidence showed that he had been shot twice. Charles Humphreys, a 56-year-old retired Air Force major, former police chief, and Florida State child abuse investigator, whose body was found in Marion County on September 12, 1990. The body was fully clothed and had been shot 6 times in the head and torso. Walter Gino Antonio, a 62-year-old who was found on November 19, 1990 near a remote logging road in Dixie County. His body was nearly nude and he had been shot 4 times in the back of the head. Peter Symes, a 65-year-old male. In June of 1990, Peter Symes left Juniper, Florida, headed to New Jersey. Law officers later found Symes' car in Orange Springs on July 4, 1990. His body was never found. All of Wuornos' victims were males between the ages of 40 and 65. She would lure them in with promises of sex and kill them by shooting them with a .22 caliber revolver, sometimes undress them, and then always take their personal possessions to sell. From the beginning, Wuornos confessed to murdering all 6 men. She claimed the men who picked her up beat and raped her, and then she shot them out of self-defense. She later changed her confession, saying that only Richard Mulroy, the first victim, had raped her, and that the others had only begun to start. Inside victim Peter Symes' car, her palm print was found. Also, the investigators found some of the victim's possessions in various pawn shops, and they all contained Wuornos' fingerprints on them. Wuornos was finally caught at the Last Resort Biker Bar in Port Orange, Florida. With similar evidence present in all cases, Wuornos pleaded guilty with no contest to the murders of the men and was sentenced to death in each case. It was at this time Aileen acknowledged her wrongdoing, and she stated the following: "I killed those men. I robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again, too. I have hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this 'she's crazy' stuff, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I am one who seriously hates human life, and I will kill again. I need to die for the killings of these people," stated Aileen while on death row. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed in Florida State. Wuornos declined the traditional last meal, which could have been anything she wanted for under $20, and instead was given a cup of coffee. Her final words: "I'd just like to say, I'm sailing with a rock. And I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back. Thank you for watching.